Good evening, y'all. I'm not from here. But it is good to be here with you. What a celebration of the ministry of North Shore Unitarian Church. I'm glad to see partners from the community, from Unitarian Universalism, colleagues, family. Hello, Mama and Papa Lucas. It's good to see you. Friends. And most especially, I wish you could see what I can see, which is your bright smiles, the smiles on the faces of the members here this day. This is a good moment where everything is possible. I made a long journey from New Jersey, where I serve the Beacon Unitarian Universalist congregation in Summit, which is just outside New York City. I took a train as flying is not allowed in my condition. Rest assured, there will be a beautiful new covenanted ministry birthed this evening. And that is all. As the train wound its way past mountains and rivers in Pennsylvania yesterday, I began considering the journey that I've shared with Lucas. We were both in seminary at Harvard Divinity School, starting in 2006. 12 years later, we each have served in ministry for nearly 9 years. It is something to know someone before they become ordained, and to journey with them during the process, knowing the struggle and the gifts, who they were before they were reverend, to know all the stories. All the stories. So just for the record, I can be bought. In all sincerity, you have, as I suspect you know, one of the most spiritually mature, organizationally insightful, fiercely loving, and loyal ministers in our movement today. I have been extraordinarily blessed to call Lucas a colleague and a friend across these 12 years. And you, North Shore Unitarian Church, you are a community committed to social justice and spiritual growth, gathered in this beautiful sanctuary. With the pride of LGBTQ inclusion and a green sanctuary, you've grown across the years from those 20 folks who came together in 1953 with the dream of a Unitarian community to now a real live place that can hold pain and wonder, fear and joy, celebration and struggle. And you have struggled to find your way to this moment, haven't you? Amen? We can be honest, we're just with friends. 300 of your closest friends. In the life of any Unitarian Universalist congregation, the installation is the ritual embodiment of the covenant that you now create between North Shore Unitarian Church and the Reverend Dr. Lucas Hergert. I've heard many of you compare this relationship dynamic to a marriage, even comparing pre-candidating to dating. Now, that may bring up all sorts of feels for you. Fair enough. But we're going to go with the marriage metaphor because I don't know a lot about baseball. So there it is. We talk in ministry about the honeymoon period, arguing how long it lasts. And sometimes we say, we ministers, whether or not we think it's a good match, the congregation and the minister that was called there. And we do, beloved, this day. I want you to know the colleagues and leaders who have watched this congregation and who know Lucas believe it to be a good match. Now, as a longtime colleague of Lucas's, I do feel a little obligated to tell you that this isn't his first go-around. He has been covenanted before. To the fine people in Livermore, California. So this really is a second marriage. And you may be feeling a certain way about that. As my southern relatives would say, you might be smelling yourself a little right now. It is what it is. But you also aren't entirely new, as I recall, to calling a minister. In fact, counting all ministerial roles, I believe that this is the 5th minister you have installed in any role, in any call in this congregation. So on the occasion of your 5th wedding, allow me to offer a toast of sorts, a reminder of what you already know, in the faith that you can be one kick-butt couple with a covenant that rivals the ages. So these are just a few reminders. First, in this covenant, remember yourself and don't run. Consider Jacob. In the story that we just heard, he has spent his entire life running from just about everything. He has stolen his blessing, the birthright blessing, from his older brother by tricking his dying father. And after his father dies, his brother makes life very difficult for Jacob. So he runs. He settles in a new place where he finds great difficulty once more with a father-in-law who tricks him into marrying not one, but 2 of his daughters. Jacob, in response, begins stealing from his father-in-law, and things come to a head and they flee in the night, but not before his wife steals a precious possession of her father's. And so Jacob's father-in-law chases him down, eventually finding him, and they resolve not to kill each other. But Jacob cannot go back. And you think you had family issues. This time, as he is trying to find his way where he will go next, running once more, he runs into the descendants of his brother, and he hears that his brother is readying an army of 400 to come and meet him. So Jacob, this great figure that we associate with all sorts of bravery, does what any solid, brave leader would do. He sends his wives and his children on ahead with some gifts. And this is where we find him, on the shore at dusk, sitting in the cold mud of the bank. He encounters the stranger who is an angel, and somehow Jacob knows that this man is different from others. And Jacob, who has tried every shortcut in his life, who has always run, finally remembers who he is. And there in the mud, with everything left to lose and nothing left to lose, he starts to wrestle with this man. They wrestle all night, and the angel eventually strikes Jacob's hip because he cannot overcome Jacob. But Jacob keeps on holding to the man, not willing to release him, and as dawn breaks, he sees his face. and demands a blessing. The angel gifts it not to get away, but because Jacob has remembered who he is, and he has at last claimed his blessing. You are the North Shore Unitarian Church. And you are the Reverend Dr. Lucas Hergert. I mean, dang. Let that come into your being. Let it frighten you a little with its magnitude, if you would. I understand you've done a lot of work facing your history. Now, beloved, is the time to wrestle your blessing. No one is their worst moment, and we are equally the people called to live into the dawn and to claim our blessing. Remember who you are at the shores of this new ministry. Plant yourself in fertile ground because you do not need to run from your triumph. Remember yourself. Wrestle your blessing. You were called for such a time as this, a time that will require you to steer the car together. Now, you have been through this before and can live into your collective wisdom. You each know that a covenant and the success of a ministry is never about just one of the parties. All of the success of this ministry to come will not rest in Lucas's hands, nor will it solely reside with the congregation. There is movement in a call that, when well navigated, allows you to build strength, courage, and power. Now, you each bring your histories. You undoubtedly have tender places and fears that are shaped by your past. My spouse, who is a developmental minister, calls these history holes. She says, you know what they are, and you try to steer the car around them. But now, in this covenanted ministry, you are called to help one another navigate the potholes. Standing by the side of the road to point at the blown-out tire, shaking your head, kicking dust, saying that you saw that big old pothole coming, while the other steered right into it, is not covenant. Dang, he just fell in that hole like the last one. Or, there they go again. Congregations always fall into that hole. There's nothing redemptive or good about allowing one another to fail. So help one another to navigate the history holes. Congregations have history holes, and so too do ministers. You have been called for such a time as this. Don't allow blame and shame to inhabit this ministry. Rather, shout out the hazards on the road and navigate them together. And when you get in a hole, help each other out. Before I went into ministry, I went through a year-long chaplain residency. And at that time, I was a little soft-spoken. It is true. And in the emergency room, I had to learn how to speak up with authority when I saw that something was going wrong, to see myself as part of the team, how to interrupt the dominant narrative, to say, hey, the patient's eyes are rolling back in their head, or she wants to be DNR. I've been working with Reverend Dr. William Barber and Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris on the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. And so I've been reading a lot of the words of Dr. King over this last year and keep coming to this sermon that he preached shortly before his murder. He said there's nothing wrong with a traffic law which says you have to stop for a red light. But when a fire is raging, the fire truck goes right through that red light, and normal traffic had better get out of the way. Or when a man is bleeding to death, the ambulance goes right through those red lights at top speed. There is a fire raging now. Disinherited people all over the world are bleeding to death from deep social and economic wounds. And they need brigades of ambulance drivers who will have to ignore the red lights of the present system until the emergency is solved. Religion in America, progressive religion, needs some ambulance drivers. We need folks who are willing to lead and blow past the red lights of institutional preservation, of blame, of shame, of the way things have always been done, of racism and sexism and systemic poverty, of an educated ignorance. We need ambulance drivers. And we need ministries that are shared, congregations and called ministers with religious professionals who can steer together. So, beloved, I say, steer the car together. And last, keep the faith in who you can be together. You may have been through this before, and you're not the naive couple believing in just one true love, which is why it matters all the more that you believe in this ministry you share. Shine. Be a power couple. Abraham and Sarah, Eleanor and Franklin, Coretta and Martin, Portia and Ellen, Beyonce and Jay-Z. It works. Keep the faith in who you can be together. Shine. In my previous settlement, we had the wild idea to start a satellite in a neighboring town that needed Unitarian Universalism. We were then a group of about 150 members, and so many folks said, how can we do this? We're so small. But we have a way of being mightier than our numbers, amen? And when we can surpass our fears of inadequacy and navel gazing, we have the ability to bring healing into the world, to be vessels where awe and wonder can flourish, and to be houses where lament can lift up its voice. We went forward, building that little satellite, even as some fought it. The board discerned, and we began ministering to the church that wasn't out of the strength of the church that was. It was a scary time. Most weeks, 20 to 30 folks showed up for worship. In our early years, one of those folks was a grandmother. She had temporary custody of her granddaughter after her daughter had taken off just weeks after her granddaughter was born. Her daughter struggled with many things and suddenly had shown up 9 years later wanting full custody with no plan. Because the grandmother was a lesbian and we were in a small town with a conservative family judge, the odds were stacked against her. When I walked into court that day to give witness testimony, I was shocked. I looked around the room and I saw 10 folks packing the 4-seater benches, all of them members of that satellite we had created. We battled our way through a year of court dates. And because of that little itty-bitty congregation, she kept custody for several more years, but what's more, she kept her dignity. She wasn't alone. And that mattered. That little itty-bitty congregation empowered its leaders to show up under the hot June sun in North Carolina for Moral Mondays and called from in its midst a leader who is now helping to lead the Poor People's Campaign. That itty-bitty congregation helped a veteran dying of Agent Orange cancer when he was all alone as an atheist in his small community to ensure that he didn't die alone and that someone gave testimony to his life. And while there are many wonderful things about that itty-bitty congregation, there is nothing particularly unique about them. So I say keep the faith in who you are and who you can be. Shine, North Shore Unitarian Church. Shine so that those who aren't here can find you. Go out with a lantern and find the lost, the lonely, and the abandoned. Shine the light here in all of the corners to find where folks in your midst are lost and lonely. Call out at dusk and ready for dawn. Keep the faith, beloved. The time is short. Remember the words of Piercy. Alone you can fight, you can refuse, you can take whatever revenge you can, but they roll right over you. But two can keep each other sane. 13, make a circle. 100, fill a hall. Shine on. Go through the hard decisions. Do the things you aren't sure you will survive. As a denomination, as a people in this country, we cannot live small, calculated lives that underestimate our power. For far too long, we have done this, told stories of our history and looked only in the rearview mirror. We need congregations, leaders, and ministers who believe in themselves and out of this faith are awake and alive to their covenants, who know that an installation is an instilling on the mind and the heart and the soul, an activated call, not placing ministry on a shelf to gather dust and be forgotten and thrown away. We need you. We need this good match. Beloved, remember yourself. Wrestle a blessing. Steer the car together. Keep the faith. Shine. It goes one at a time. It starts when you care to act. It starts when you do it again. After they said no, it starts when you say we and know who you mean. And each day you mean one more. So may you live and love North Shore Unitarian Church and the Reverend Dr. Lucas Hergert. So may you live and love. Amen.